Hey, everybody, welcome back to SmartBug on Tap, the podcast where we dive into what's driving smarter, more scalable HubSpot strategy across marketing, sales, and RevOps. Before we jump in, if you're enjoying these episodes and you want more real world insights for RevOps professionals, marketers, tech leaders, go ahead and hit the subscribe so that way you never miss an episode. I'm your host today, Casey Peddicord, and today we are digging into a topic that sparks so much debate in the enterprise marketing space: attribution and attribution reporting. When you've got multiple departments, I think about dozens of channels, 6-month buying cycles, figuring out what's actually driving revenue can feel, well, impossible. But attribution can be done right, and it can be a really powerful lever, not just for reporting, but also for decision making. Joining me today is someone who has been in the trenches with some of the most complex attribution models out there. Sandy Moore, SmartBug's Senior Director of Account Strategy. Sandy, so glad you're here. Why don't you kick us off with a quick intro and how attribution maybe has become such a big part of your work?
Yeah, thanks, Casey. Excited to be here. As you said, yep, I'm a Senior Director of Account Strategy. So I lead a team of directors, strategists, and specialists, and I work with both our internal teams and our clients on solving some of these operational challenges. I really sit at the intersection of people, processes, and platforms. And attribution is one of those things that comes up all the time as one of the biggest challenges. So for me, attribution really is what I consider a RevOps problem. It's not just a reporting problem. It really touches your CRM, your lifecycle stages, your campaigns, your strategy, all of it. And it can have a ripple effect all the way up to the C-suite. So what I've been focused on is helping teams build models that are accurate and actionable and, most importantly, usable.
Heck yeah. I love that. That's awesome. Man, so excited. Oh gosh, we could talk about this all day. Let's dive in and let's start with maybe where attribution is helping teams today, and also talk about, I think, about where it's probably falling short. So, Sandy, my first question for you: why is attribution reporting or attribution and attribution reporting such a headache for, I would say, enterprise organizations?
Yes, good question. I would say it's most painful for enterprise level organizations. And that's really because you're dealing with a lot of data that can be siloed across a bunch of different tools. Think about the different tech stacks that different
Yeah.
enterprise organizations have, regions that they cover, the sheer number of teams and the volume of employees that they're trying to bring together. And then of course the customer journeys, because a lot of enterprise companies, sell a variety of products and services to so many different customers and essentially ICPs. So that sheer volume of touch points combined with also longer sales cycles, because some of these products and services are really complex and it takes a long time for people to make decisions. And then you're also bringing in multiple decision makers that you're trying to sell to. It really becomes an incredibly difficult way to assign the right credit to the right sources when it comes to attribution.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I think about it's all those different parts and pieces you talked about. There's so much data in each one of those, the regions, the teams, the journeys. It's like it can really be overwhelming. What's one sign of an attribution model that you see, Cindy, that just isn't cutting it?
Yeah, I would say if your revenue is not going up and you can't figure out why, that's the biggest red flag, because it means that you're not able to attribute what's working and what isn't. So it means that the data is not driving the action, or worse, it could even be telling conflicting stories. So you're not even understanding what's happening. And maybe that means you've even outgrown your current model. So let me give you an example. Let's say you have all this traffic coming to your website, or you're creating all of this lead generation. But if your revenue is not going up, something is broken.
Yeah, that's so true. It's like what's working and not, no, what's working and not working. It's a great segue. I think about, like, are there any attribution approaches or models that you've seen actually work in a large, like multi-touch, multi-team type environment?
Yeah. So usually a lot of hybrid models. I wouldn't say there's like a one size fits all solution for all enterprise organizations, but a lot of times what we will recommend is a U-shaped model or a multi-touch model where essentially gives 40% credit to the first touch, it will go 40% to the last touch, and then 20% for somewhere in between. And when we talk about touches, it's essentially how they're interacting with the company before they become, a close one deal. So a lot of times what you do is then you layer on those models with some, custom lead scoring insights to really understand your marketing mix modeling and then really do analysis from there to see what's performing best. And so I think if you can look at all of those different touch points and the complexity that they have across the different channels by giving attribution to all of those different items, it does give a clearer picture and it does help balance and how you can interpret all of that data versus if you only give all of that attribution to the first touch or the last touch because it's not that linear, it's not that clear.
Yeah, and I love that, not to totally plug HubSpot right here, but HubSpot makes it so easy to switch between those different models because I think about for different campaigns or different reports, you might want to see that in a different way. Like U-shaped may make a lot of sense for this particular one, and standard across the board may make sense across or for another one. HubSpot makes it so easy to do that. Sandy, what's one common pitfall? Since we're talking about HubSpot, I think HubSpot has flashy dashboards. I'm partial. I like HubSpot. What's one common pitfall that you see with like the HubSpot flashy dashboards or any other system that you use to be able to do attribution model?
Yeah, I would say with almost any, system that you're doing your reporting in, if you don't understand how those numbers are calculated, you don't understand where they're coming from. Especially with HubSpot, they have a lot of out of the box reporting in the reporting library, and then you can build on that with some custom reporting. But if you can't explain how those numbers are calculated, you're going to be confused. And then all that great reporting doesn't make sense because then you can't work backwards to figure out, what parts of the puzzle aren't making sense because you don't understand the formula for that calculation.
Yeah, it's like, gosh, and if you've listened to this podcast, I probably said this before for a lot of different things, but I'll use the same analogy. It's like building a house, right? And if you get the foundation right, it makes everything else work so much better. You get that foundation wrong, your house you could really have some problems there. And I think about that attribution reporting the same way. It's like you can really make it wildly complex. But I think some of the best ones that we've seen, I hope to agree with me here. I think some of the best ones that we've seen really get what you're talking about as far as the foundation right. And when you get that foundation right, it really helps not so much overcomplicate everything else. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's fair. And really, like you said, starting the foundation, but also starting simple because you're going to go more complex down the road, especially with enterprise organizations, because there are so many touch points that we talked about earlier. There are so many elements involved. But if you start with, like you said, with that foundation, then yes, and build off of that, then you'll see things a little bit clearer when you do these attribution reports.
Yeah, and it's a great segue. Speaking of simplifying it, like, are there things that if I'm a RevOps leader and I'm listening, if I'm a marketing leader and I'm listening, and I'm trying to simplify my attribution setup, like, where do I start? What do I do first?
Goals. Goals, 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 especially if you have SMART goals, are even more helpful. I tell a lot of people when we start working with clients, that's usually one of the first questions we ask, right? From the first meeting is what are you looking to achieve? What are those goals, whether they be revenue goals or lead gen goals or whatever type of goals we're focusing on. But from there you can start doing your backwards math is what I refer to. You figure out, this is how much revenue we have to have. Okay, well, based on that revenue, well, how many deals do we have to close? What is our average rate for closing a deal from an opportunity to a close one? Okay, how many of our sales qualified leads actually turn into opportunities? And knowing all of those different conversions in the past really do help. I would also say, look at some of your existing data sources. We're not starting from square one a lot of times here. So you can leverage a lot of what you've already had in place with some of your reporting and go from there. And then really pick a simple model that outlines how you can attribute each of these marketing activities to line up to those goals. A lot of times marketers are not responsible for close won deals or driving revenue. Really, that does fall on the sales team, of course. But as a marketer, you can then say, we know we need this many SQLs because this will turn into this many opportunities that will turn into this many close won customers. And from there, you can say, okay, what is driving the most SQLs and understand your attribution model of which marketing activities you need to do to drive those SQLs to sales.
Oh, Sandy, that's so good. You've been doing this a little bit.
A little bit.
It's crazy. Yeah, yeah. No, that's so much gold. I mean, we could spend an hour just picking apart what you just talked about in that last little paragraph. That is so good. You talk about the different teams there. I think about how do you balance like an executive's needs versus just like the data overload. Because I like when I log into HubSpot and I'm looking at attribution reporting, and if you don't know what you're looking for, if you haven't looked at it before, man, it can really feel like, gosh, I have first of all no idea what I'm doing. Second of all, there's so much data there, and in an enterprise organization, you got all those different parts and pieces. So, like, do you have any tips on balancing like what the executive may need to see it versus like just data overload?
Sure. Yes. Well, executives reporting is completely different than what operation teams need or different department heads need. And, really you want to segment them into different tiers. And what we do a lot of times using HubSpot is we create different dashboards based on those different segments. And so a lot of times what the executives need or the C-suite needs is what do they have to report to the board of directors? What information is it that they need to show? And that is the reporting segment that you have there. Versus a manager, they may need to see more reporting on how their team is performing. So, for example, a sales manager really needs to understand who are their high performing team members and what activities are they doing to help drive those sales. And so by splitting them up that way, you can then have different views for different levels of all of the different departments, and even whether it be executive, manager, VP, depending on their role, and then still have a single source of truth behind all of them that still is focusing all up to the goals that we talked about earlier. So even though everyone needs to see something different and they need it drilled down based on what they need to report on to be able to be successful at their job and who essentially they have to answer to within the organization as far as being successful with hitting their individual goals, it still makes sense to have the overarching goals of the business goals, essentially. Overarching, what revenue numbers does that company have to hit for the year? That's really going to apply to all of these different tiers, but then it is segmented into how each department and each role rolls up to that to help everyone hit the common goal.
Ah, so good. And I think about from a goal perspective, since we're on this goal kick for a second, one of the goals that I personally have, and I think a lot of other people have right now too, revolves a lot around AI. Like how do we incorporate that more in our day-to-day work? What does it look like from maybe a HubSpot perspective? How do we use AI on a more day-to-day basis, and even in this reporting world around attribution? Like when I think about AI and how fast it's evolving, are there privacy concerns or are there privacy changes that you see impacting, like how you're doing attribution reporting today for clients?
Oh, yes. Yes. So we're seeing more and more that third party cookies, IP tracking, email pixeling, they're all being restricted. So, yes, privacy is on everyone's mind and everyone's concern. So, we certainly want to make sure that we are honoring that. But then unfortunately, this is creating some blind spots in that customer journey, which then also leads to some of this attribution reporting, which is tricky. And it makes the multi-touch tracking less reliable. So using your first party data and using any sort of contextual information is really more important than ever. And when it comes to AI, what we're seeing is we're actually seeing a shift in what we call SEO or search engine optimization to now AEO, which is answer engine
Yeah.
optimization. And so as we're seeing this shift in how AI is evolving and giving us the information that we need, we are going to see difference in reporting. We are going to have to evolve and say, okay, how is AI helping or essentially hurting our business? Because those answers that AI gives when you're doing a simple search can be sometimes really difficult to change AI's opinion because it's collecting data from across a whole bunch of different websites. And so, if it is talking really highly of your products and services, that's golden. But if it's not, you now have this uphill battle to overcome and to necessarily be able to figure out what you need to change and to figure out which part of your marketing mix is attributing to that answer not being the ideal one that you want is getting tricky. And that's something as marketers we are really diving into and doing our homework and research to try and figure out what's going to move it in the positive direction.
Yeah, and I think I already know the answer to this, but I want your I want your take on it, Sandy. Yeah, the AI part of it, like, is it truly helpful for you right now, or is it just hype?
So it's a little bit of both. I would say AI helps you with pattern recognition, helps you analyze a lot of the data in a short period of time, especially when you have like large, messy data sets, especially enterprise companies, because certainly they do. I've seen some of the messiest CRMs come from enterprise organizations. So it is helpful in that way. But AI without a human touch can obscure that logic. And we don't want to blindly trust what AI is telling us. It is really important that we interpret it and we validate it. So there is some governance that needs to be done. There is some human oversight that needs to be done. AI is not going to replace how a human can interpret data. I mean, the AI is a machine. It is looking at all of the data points and it's coming up with a conclusion, but it doesn't take into account all of those gray areas that a human can contextually grasp and incorporate into that logic.
Yeah, we've covered so much, and there's so much gold that we could dig into in what you're talking about. And if I'm a marketer, if I'm someone who's managing a CRM, if I'm trying to show that reporting, what's one thing to stop doing, and maybe add one thing to start doing?
I would say stop obsessing over the perfect attribution report or model. It doesn't exist because there is no,
Sandy, you're not supposed to say that. Oh my gosh.
there is perfect linear
I feel you.
report out
I
there.
agree with you. Yeah.
Um,
It's like you have to take it with a grain of salt.
right. Yes.
It's you have to trust the system. Like I think about HubSpot, you have to trust it, but you have to be able to interpret it in a way that makes sense for the business.
Yes, that's exactly it. Because there can be so many complex use cases for why a certain attribution worked at one given point and it might not necessarily work again. So even knowing that there isn't a perfect attribution report, it doesn't mean that you should stop doing attribution reporting by any means, because you need some direction. You need to know where to go. But once you have some of that reporting, you then can validate it with the results, like we talked about earlier, making sure that your attribution reporting and what that data is telling you is working or not working is actually moving the needle to drive, most of the time your business goal, driving revenue and increasing the company's overall market share. I would also say, really focus on trying to be accurate with your data. We always say, if you dirty data in, dirty data out, like you really want to make sure that whatever you're reporting on is accurate information, that you're keeping your CRM or your database really clean so that you can make good decisions off of that. And, don't be afraid to get in there and start playing around with different attribution models and compare them. We don't want anyone to feel paralyzed by it because it can feel a little bit overwhelming. The worst thing you can do is no action at all. So start having several attribution models, and then compare and contrast to see what those different reports are sharing with you.
Oh my gosh. So good. Sandy, you're going to have people knocking down your door trying to work with you on this attribution stuff. Cause I know I talk to clients all day long, and I know it's a pain point where a lot of times it's just confusing. There's so much to take into account. And I agree with you. It's so hard sometimes just to look at the report and go, this is it. And usually that's not the case with attribution. It's different than like sales activities where you look at it and you're like, that's very, very black and white. Here, there's a lot of interpretation in how you take that data and be able to, I guess, make more informed decisions off of it, like you were talking about. Sandy, any last words, anything else that's top of mind for you around attribution, or any other hit tips or tricks?
Yes, I would just say, keep diving into your data, but at the same time, take into account that there's something to always be said for brand awareness, brand recognition. As a marketer, those things are really hard to measure. So if you always keep that in mind as a layered on approach, then I think you're off to the races. Hopefully you'll have a lot of success.
That's awesome. Sandy, what's the best way for folks to reach out to you if they have questions?
Sure, you can find me on LinkedIn. I will tell you my maiden name is still in there, and my formal name is Sandra Galucci Moore. So find with me on LinkedIn and love to connect.
Sandy, thank you so much. We're wrapping it up today for the episode of SmartBug on Tap. Sandy, you're incredible. I think so much of you, so highly of you, especially around this attribution and how your team works. It's so good. Thanks for breaking that down for us on what's really going on in the attribution space, especially at the enterprise level. I think a takeaway for me is it's clear that there's at the end of the day, there's really no silver bullet, but there are better ways to do it and to make a more informed decision moving forward.
Yes. Well, thank you. I'm glad I could be here today and really appreciate your time. And this was really fun. So I hope I get invited again.
Perfect. We'd love to have you again. Thank you all for tuning in to Smart Bug on Tap. Don't forget to subscribe, and we will catch you next time. See ya.